Hey there. This series is how to be a better field target shooter in 15 minutes. And the idea is to basically take different topics regarding shooting field target and breaking them down into small bite-sized pieces in like a 15-minute format, or as close as we can get. And I'm interviewing different shooters in the field target community, some of the top shooters we have about different topics. Today I'm going to be talking to Cameron Kerndt. And we're going to be talking about his practice routine. And Cameron lives in California. He started shooting hunter PCP back in 2015, and he shoots in like a dead man position. If you've ever seen it, it's like he's cross-legged and he's hunched over in a dead man position. It's kind of unique. But now he shoots WFTF piston. He switched to that in 2017. And so he's one of the top shooters. He's been to Worlds many times and is one of the top world shooters. And so we're going to talk to him now about his practice routine. Well, hello, Cameron. How you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing quite well. How about yourself?
I'm doing very good. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us a little bit, share some of your knowledge. You're one of the top shooters in the country, and I appreciate your time. I'd like to talk to you this evening about practice routine. And with all these shooters that I'm interviewing, one thing is very reoccurring is how much time they spend practicing. And you have to practice to get very good at what you do. So I'm curious about your practice routine, how often you practice. What do you practice the most? So we'll just start there. So how often do you practice field target?
I practice field target anywhere from 2 to 4 days a week.
Okay.
When that's coming up to a big match, like a Grand Prix, or getting ready for like traveling, to a Worlds or something like that. Sometimes I'll step up to maybe 3 to 6 days a week. And I'm very lucky that I made sure I bought a property to where I can shoot.
Right.
So that's very helpful. Having a place to shoot is important. And for somebody who wants to do it all the time, it's very convenient to step out and in less than 5 minutes be on your own course, shooting, practicing, instead of taking 30 minutes to drive somewhere and then getting set up and waiting for other people to shoot and safety protocols. But yeah, 2 to 4 days a week typically.
Okay. And so how long does the typical practice session last for you?
It generally lasts anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay.
And that's just getting out there, confirming my zero, 25 to 27 and a half yards, shooting 10 yards and then shooting 55 yards to confirm that my trajectory seems to be on par. And then I have generally a 7-lane course set up in the backyard at all times during the summer season. And sometimes I'll shoot 2 shots per target. Sometimes I'll shoot 1 shot per target. And it generally takes me maybe 20 minutes to go through that course. And then I will generally, if I'm feeling froggy, I'll shoot the whole course kneeling. And then I'll double up on my standards too.
Okay. So you're shooting regular targets, you're shooting from a sitting position. Sometimes you shoot the whole thing kneeling, and then do you have a couple of targets there that are like standard targets?
Yeah, so I have a couple targets my standing targets are what you would find at like a world event, like a 1-inch target pushing 30, and then a 40 mil or like a 1 9/16 target roughly at about 43 to 45 yards. That's my standing and kneeling lane typically.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good. So do you practice would you say you practice like your standard lanes and then your kneeling and your standing about equally, or do you do standing lanes more than the rest? Or
if I feel like I'm lacking in my ability of shooting standing, I will generally double the amount of practice I do there. So I will shoot this. I'll start on a seated lane, shoot that, maybe get the gun warmed up, and then shoot a standard, go through the entire course, and then shoot the standards again. So I like to try to keep it comparable to what you may expect at a big match where 10% of your shots could be force position lanes.
Right.
So I'd say about equally a lot of the time, but that's just because really matches are won with positionals. Most people are comfortable and accurate enough in a seated position to be stable and knock down a target, but standing is where it's at. Kneeling is a little bit more forgiving, but you got to get your standards.
Yeah. I've learned over the last few years that, whenever you increase your ability and get better and better at this sport, the shooters at the top end of the bell curve, the force positions, that's really what puts you either right above or right below the next shooter. And so they're very important. That's great. Do you think it's possible to practice too much? Can you get burned out or frustrated? Can you overdo it?
Absolutely. You certainly can. If it wasn't for me shooting with my neighbor a lot of the time, I'll wake up before my wife and daughter wake up. I'll be up at about 5:50. Grab a cup of coffee, and I'll be in my backyard at about 6:05. And my 84-year-old neighbor will be there waiting for me, and we'll shoot my course in the morning. And it's just kind of a little bit of like a little bit of fellowship there too. He's like my best friend. He's a grandpa I never had, so I get to enjoy that every morning we practice, and he beats me fairly often. He was an X 1,000-yard All-Army competitor, and man, he's still got it.
So you kind of have some accountability there. You have somebody there making sure that that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah. It works out really nice, but you can easily get burnt out. Sometimes some mornings I wake up and I'm a little sore from work, and I'm like, oh man, do I really want to get in that pretzel position that I'd shoot in and at this early in the morning? But you got to do it. You have to push yourself. And if you want to be successful at something, you have to. I don't like generally saying this, but you have to do it so much that the difficult targets almost seem boring. And shooting a Springer, that's very hard to do because every target, including, quote unquote, like gimme targets, will get you. And
if you let your guard down and
absolutely, you don't exhale properly, you don't squeeze the trigger properly, and that's where practice really practice helps with less mental errors, realistically, and confirming your data and making sure your trajectory is proper. All of your ranging is the same for different temperatures. If you don't practice in different windy conditions, or man, you're going to be a fair weather shooter, and your gun's going to be set up at one temperature. And where I live, I can have a temperature spread of 40 in the morning and 105 in the afternoon.
Wow.
So it works great. I can shoot in the morning, make sure my gun's zeroed at 40 and see where I'm ranging at, and then shoot it in the hot in the afternoon and get a good comparison. And take notes.
So it sounds like you typically practice in the morning, but you also practice in other times of the day just to get a temperature change or a environment weather change.
Correct. Yeah. All guns can be affected by temperature. Springers especially. I mean, mine has an O-ring seal with a parachute on the front, and those thermal expansion, they do just enough to slow down the piston, or my Aceal or Delrin spring guide can increase ever so slightly and increase more spring, and offset the lubricant that's warmer, and it's weird. So you gotta know it. If you don't, you're just not going to be prepared.
Gotcha. All right. Well, very good. So before we close, would you have any suggestions or best practices for like a beginning field target shooter regarding practicing and their practice routine? What kind of advice would you give for someone who's either a beginner or maybe they've been shooting for a while, but they don't really have a great practice routine? What would you suggest?
I would suggest to practice your position, seated position. Find one that gets you stable. Practice ranging at various distances. Maybe grab a box with a target on it and just like either a tape, or I use like a target winder. I'll pull it to a random distance. I'll range it. I'll shoot it. I'll take notes if I misranged. And I'd set up a remote control car. I used to race those on a high end level, and so I had them laying around. So I just drive it out to random distance, range the target on top of it, shoot, and then drive it out to random. And that's how I got a lot of practice in real fast. Unknown distances are very important for practicing, because that's where you can really get it in. Wind, look for wind. Go out and shoot in the wind. Shoot. I'm not necessarily saying shoot in the rain, but it's good to know what your gun will do in the rain. And let's see, what else? Positionals, those are important. You should definitely practice those. Yeah. But if you can't hit your seated targets, what's the point of being good at your positionals? So, start with the basics, get comfortable, make sure your gun's shooting. You always confirm your zero. Don't just assume your gun's on, ever. If you go to a match, there's very few people I know that are successful where they can go to a match with no confirmation in the morning and do well. And I think that's mostly luck, because there's always a random thing that can happen to your equipment during traveling or anything. Yeah. So always check your 0, check your 10, check your 55. And then if those are all good, then it should take the pressure off for the rest of the day.
Gotcha. And you mentioned something there that is a really good tip, I think, and that's taking notes. That's something I've done. Take notes. How you did this day. What was the weather like? What did you struggle with? What did you find that worked? So you can, you think you can remember those things, but if you go back and look at your notes, you'll see things that you kind of forgot or need to be reminded of your next time when you go out and shoot.
Yeah, where they say the dullest pencil lasts longer than the sharpest mind, I guess. So it's a good thing to take notes. I don't do it often enough, and I always say I'll never forget this, but it just disappears when something else comes up. So, yeah.
Well, any last thoughts before we close? I don't know. I mean, if you love this sport and you want to get better at it, I would just try to find a good, safe place to practice, and just keep enjoying it. Don't focus so much on beating the course and just beating everybody else. When I focus on the fun of it, I generally shoot way better. And I never approach a lane saying, I can't hit that target. That's too far. That's too small. Just say, I generally walk onto a course and say, I can hit every single target here. And then just focus enough and just go through your routine a little bit, ranging, loading, whatever, and just execute. Take it and brush off a shot that you miss. We'll try to learn from it, but don't let it ruin your next shot. Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Well, thanks again, Cameron, for the time and all the wise words here and advice. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. And hope you have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.